I'm Michelle in Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. Invite historical drama fans you know to subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever they enjoy their favorite podcast. Subscribers receive notifications about new episodes and bonus content.
Sign up for our newsletter on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters or on our Instagram bio link at Historical Drama Sisters and receive news and announcements about upcoming podcasts and historical drama activities. Enjoy the podcast, and thank you for listening. Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, where we talk about historical drama series and films as windows to the past and mirrors of the present. I'm Michonne Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. Michonne and I rarely get an opportunity to talk about short films on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. That is a film that is 40 minutes or less. This is the first podcast where we spotlight an independently produced historical drama short film. That film is NISEI, directed and written by Darren Haruo Rae, our guest for this podcast. NISEI shines a light on an all-Japanese-American troop of soldiers who fought in World War II for a country imprisoning them and their families because of their ancestry.
In NISEI, we meet Minoru and John, two brothers born and raised in the U.S. to parents who immigrated from Japan. Minoru is eager and idealistic, but John is more pessimistic and cynical. When World War II breaks out, they're stripped of their citizenship and placed in internment camps with other Japanese Americans. To prove their loyalty, they volunteer for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, a unit comprised of Japanese Americans like themselves. Torn between country and family, both brothers must face harrowing combat overseas in the devastating theater of war. But they also face discrimination and ostracization at home, in a country that doesn't want them. NISEI was listed in Variety's top 15 shortlist predictions for Best Live Action Short Film for the 96th Academy Awards, and it has screened at over 20 film festivals, veterans associations, and historical societies. The film is currently online on Amuleto via YouTube, History Fix, and Samantha.
Darren Haruo Rae is a Japanese-American director-producer based in Los Angeles and a Film Independent Fellow. His 2023 film NISEI, inspired by his Japanese-American grandfather's World War II experiences in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, earned the Oscar-qualifying award for Best Dramatic Short Film at Cinequest Film Festival in 2023. Darren is currently producing the feature film Surrender, starring Andrea Bang from Kim's Convenience, which is beginning its film festival run.
Well, welcome, Darren, to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
For those who don't know the historical background or meaning of the term NISEI, tell us why you chose NISEI for the film title.
Yeah, so Nisei means second generation. Japanese Americans is what it's typically referred to. And it was referred to a lot of my grandfather's generation, the generation that was the first generation born and raised in America. So his father, my great-grandfather, immigrated from Japan in the 1920s. So they were Issei. And then my grandfather and my grandmothers, they were considered Nisei. And so when people refer to those times talking about the camps, talking about the 442nd, you hear the term thrown around Nisei a lot. And that's what they're referring to, because that's just the majority of the Japanese Americans at the time were Nisei.
You produced NISEI in 2023. It's, as we mentioned, in the introduction, it's a story of two brothers. It's inspired by your grandfather's diaries. And it also takes place following Imperial Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, which we know as December 7th, 1941. Then the internment of Japanese Americans in February 1942 by executive order signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Tell us how you found this story and what motivated you to do this film.
Yeah, so like I said, my grandfather and my family were Japanese Americans, and my family was one of the ones affected after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And my family, along with 120,000 other Japanese Americans, were sent to internment camps on the West Coast for no other reason than just fear. People being afraid of if they're loyal, if they're going to betray us. No proof, no reasoning behind that. It was simply because of the color of their skin. And I've grown up with these stories my whole life. Excuse me if that's my dog barking. Uh, I've grown up with these stories my whole life, and ever since I was a little kid, I would talk to my grandfather and hear these stories about what it was like in the camps, what it was like in the war, and I never really understood how uncommon knowledge this was. I'd put it that way. And so when it came time to learning, when people ask you about like your family history and stuff about yourself, it's being Japanese American, I didn't realize how unique that was, how unique of an experience it was, like going through World War II. And so as I got older and kind of found my career path and started getting into filmmaking, this was stories that I was always passionate about. To be frank, when I was younger, I didn't feel I had the skill set to tell it appropriately. And it wasn't until I got much older, but I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to do a story not just about my family, about the whole Japanese American community and really shedding light on this. And I think the proof is kind of shown with the film itself, just being able to travel the festival circuit, showing it to a lot of great people, but showing it to a lot of people that had no idea about it. I remember we were playing in Indianapolis, and after the film screened, we had the whole theater come up to us and just say, we had no idea this was a thing. Like you hear about so much about the heroism of America and what happened during the war, but you tend to forget the bad side of it and the things that we did as well too. And so it feels very fitting and kind of right place, right time for me to be able to bring this story to life.
It's interesting because our uncles and our father served in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the uncles went to Europe. Well, one did.
I think our dad was in the Pacific.
He was in the Pacific, and so was another uncle. But it wasn't until I was an adult. I mean, I knew about Pearl Harbor. We always heard that December 7th, 1941. But it wasn't until I was an adult when I learned about the internment camps and the internment of Japanese Americans. And it wasn't until I was an adult until I learned about the 6888, which we did a podcast about. So a lot of stories are coming out about World War II now. And that's why we think it's important we talk with you about your film on this podcast.
Yeah. I think it's a generational thing too, like that generation in general. I mean, Japanese American culture, we're very reserved. We don't like to be showy or feel like we're coming across as bragging. And so like my grandfather, even when him telling me stories was just little excerpts here and there. It was nothing like super finite detailed. And the more I learned about it, like I would tell my mom, and my mom was like, he never told me that. And it's like, you have to think about that. Like he didn't want to put those horrors or tragedies on my mother. Like when he got out of the war, he wanted to just be American, live the American dream and provide for his family. And so it makes sense why you wouldn't want to put that on your children. And so it wasn't until later in life in his twilight years that I felt like he felt more comfortable opening up about it. And I feel like that's the same for a lot of veterans and people who went through that time period. So
yeah. The thing about your film is that it's your grandfather's story, but at the same time, it happens in a larger historical context. And so talk a little bit about what other resources did you use to kind of fill in like the kind of historical background and to learn more about that unit and their experience during World War II?
yeah, that's a great question. And so for me starting out, like I had a few anecdotes from my grandfather. There was actually an interview done with him back in 2006 or 2008 through the Japanese American National Museum, which is actually on public records. You can find it. You just kind of have to search a bit. But they did a very thorough, like 5-hour interview with him as my grandfather. So he joked and kind of like ignored some of the things that I felt like he didn't really want to talk about. But there's a lot of resources that you can find out through the JACL, through the National Museum and stuff like that. And so that was kind of my starting point because I only knew experiences of the camp of the war through his lens. And it wasn't until I started diving into this film, I started thinking about like, what does it mean to be a child in the camp? What does it mean to be a woman in the camp? And these are things that obviously existed and I knew existed, but I didn't think to do more research into it. And so it was obviously starting there. I actually have a plethora of books from my family that I've owned for how many years, but I just never thought to look through them. And the kind of crazy stuff with that is like, as I'm going through these books, I'm finding notes and little handwritten things that he was sending to himself, like as a reminder, like he has this full list in his handwriting, like of all of the soldiers that were in his unit and stuff like that. I found like from 1980s, they had a reunion of the camp survivors from Topaz, and they made it like a yearbook, like a high school yearbook. And so you're going through these and it's just, you're seeing these families, and it kind of takes that sheen of, it breaks down that wall of this is real. And seeing these real people besides my grandfather and realizing how large of a scale it is, that's what was very eye-opening to me. And so that really inspired me to just continue outreach and try to learn as much as I can through the community, through the different members of these groups. And even to this day, like even just through screening it, I've met a lot of people who have given me a lot of insight and critiquing the film in very like good ways as well too, because like I said, I only know this kind of one lens of it. And so learning more about, you know, the people that wouldn't volunteer, for the people, for example, like Tule Lake, there was this group called the Hoshidan, which they labeled them as extremists, but in reality, they were just, why would we give our lives for a country that doesn't even want us? And so that's a tough pill to swallow within the community itself. Is I don't see either side as right or wrong, but you have to understand the nuance of why people made these decisions. And so really being able to talk to people that are still alive that went through it. I actually met I won't say his full name, but I met this amazing man named Ed who was a child in the camps. And he told me, he's like, it was the best time of my life. I didn't realize how bad things were because I was a kid. Like I would go to school, we would dig little clubhouses underneath the barracks and we would play with toys. And I didn't know any better or worse for it because I was 5, right? And so it's just trying to take in as much information as possible and understanding like my film is a very small, narrow view of it. And I like to say that my family I'm using this as a vessel for the greater community, and it's meant to be a conversation starter, not an end all be all to what the Japanese American story is.
Yeah, and one of the things you do in the film, and it's remarkable because it's basically about a 20-minute film,
Mhm.
but you present some of the complexities and those nuances around what the experience was like for the various characters, what their point of view was about their experience being in the internment camps or making the decision to join the army and serve in the war. So talk a little bit about how you decided how you were going to print those different perspectives in the stories, because it sounds like you had a lot of data and personal stories that you were gathering from.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that really kind of got my mind working and thinking about the complexities of it was actually from an excerpt of my grandfather's interview where he talked about how he volunteered. He was a little ashamed. He didn't really want to tell his father because by then his father got sent to Tule Lake, which was considered the extremist camp. So he volunteered without his father knowing. And before he got shipped out, he said, he basically told himself, I'm going to see him because I don't think I'm coming back. I think I'm going to die over there. So I need to get this off my conscience and I need to see my father one last time, whether he wants to see me or not. And so he goes to see his father. And when he gets to Tule Lake, the guard asks him, he goes, he's in uniform. He goes, that's the only clothes you brought? He goes, yeah. He goes, I can't let you in here. If some of the Japanese Americans in here see you, they're going to try to attack you because they see you as a traitor. And so that was the first time that it really struck me as, you know, not everyone in the community thought the same way. And so that was the first of many, just kind of going down that rabbit hole of trying to find all these intricate storylines. And you have to remember too, like something like my great grandfather, he was put in this extremist camp. It was put into Tule Lake, and there's something called the No Boys, which was a loyalty questionnaire, which was basically proving that you're loyal to America. You're not gonna, go back to Japan. You have to swear your allegiance to the Emperor of Japan, and you have to volunteer for active duty in the military. And a lot of people signed that no, not because they were anti-American or anti-patriotic. It felt like a catch-22, where it's like, by making me sign this, you're already establishing that I'm not American. And so that's why I don't want to sign it. Not because I don't agree with it necessarily. It's just feeling like even if I say the answer you want to say, there's going to be repercussions down the line where you're going to use this as proof saying, oh, they're not actually American. And so a lot of people that went to those extreme camps weren't extreme or weren't necessarily fueling that, ideology that they were trying to project that the Japanese Americans were doing. And so my great grandfather got sent partially because he didn't speak very good English, but also because he didn't want to sign that questionnaire and get in trouble for that. And so those two moments were it was very shocking to me when I was learning that, because it just shows the nuances and the difficulties of even between like a father and son relationship, the strain that puts on that. And it's this idea of that my grandfather volunteered, went through boot camp, spent, half a year doing all this stuff, thinking that his father was going to hate him for it. And like, how terrifying is that? How sad is that? But also like how courageous is that to push through your values and morals, even though, you think your closest friends and families and loved ones might not accept you. And so kind of taking all those stories in and trying to weave it into 20 minutes, as you said, it goes by very fast, is I think that's the beauty of cinema, right? Less is more. You can present these situations, you can present these moments that happen and let the audience sort of take away what they want from it. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we ended up there. I don't know if that really answered that question, but it's just kind of the thought process going into it. So,
yeah.
Well, it gives us a lot of groundwork to talk about the next question, which is the appearance of the American flag. Now, nothing is more symbolic of American allegiance than carrying a flag with you, uh, especially for film. Tell us how you're using the American flag as a symbol in this film, in NISEI.
Right. I mean, on the surface level, you can look at the flag and obviously think American patriotism, and fighting for America. But I think the deeper message I wanted to portray with that is this idea of hope. And that comes with one of the lines where, kind of spoiler about the film, but when he gets the flag from his little brother, and they talk about more specifically how their mother made that for them when they first got to this country. And I really wanted to establish this idea of like, when his father and his mother got here, this was the best thing that ever happened to them. They were able to come to America. They were basically starting their lives, trying to live the American dream and give a better life to their children. And so that was very important for me, and trying to use some form of, again, in a short form, something that could kind of establish that theme and get physically passed through as well as emotionally. The flag felt very fitting to me. And part of that too is you look at some old photography from the camps themselves. And Ansel Adams did a lot of photography during the camps. Like the War Relocation Authority actually sanctioned these photos. It was kind of weird. Like they did these really, I don't want to say beautiful photos, but it's heart-wrenching photos of the living situations. And the government, the one that put the people in there, they're the ones that okayed the photos, which is, it's like if you did something bad, you think you try to cover it up. But that just shows they didn't think what they were doing was wrong at the time. Sorry, that was kind of a breaking away from the idea of the flag, though. But there's this really incredible photo of the camps. It's just rows and rows of internment camps, of barracks, just these wooden barracks. And in the center of it is this flagpole, and it's the American flag. And it's just there's so much dichotomy with that image, and it's so polarizing to see that there's this pride to displaying the flag, even, when they're incarcerated. And I'm not saying the Japanese American people are the ones that put that flag up, but just the brass of thinking that was, that message was being shown correctly. And so that's why I said, like, it's the level of patriotism, but on the deeper message, it's the family trying to grow and give that dream that they always, wanted. And whether that means through volunteering for the unit or whatever that is, that was hopefully the intention, the message of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the questions that your film also raises about who is an American and at what point, particularly if your family has immigrated, at what point do you cross over into that identity or the sense that this home now is home? So
Mhm.
that was something I felt was really strong in your film as well.
Thank you.
I understand Amuleto is pretty competitive, so the fact that you have your film up there is quite the honor. What impact were you hoping for when you made this film, and how have you seen audiences responding to it?
Yeah, when I made this film, I wanted it to be an introduction to the topic. Like I said before, I was surprised at how few people actually knew these stories. And so I didn't make the film. I mean, it's a short film, so you're not making it to make money to begin with. But it was this idea of this can be this intro piece to a grander conversation. And I always thought, if one person saw it and it made them go on Wikipedia or it made them Google one thing, I consider that a win. Especially in this day and age, as I'm getting older myself. I realized I had a very sobering moment when I realized I am probably the last generation that has any direct contact with survivors of World War II, of veterans of World War II. And so someone's got to keep these stories alive. And the messaging in this is extremely important. And, what do they say? History repeats itself once, people start to forget these things. And so keeping this kind of on the forefront of storytelling is extremely important to me. And so I I just made it because it felt right, and I really wanted to make it. I really wanted to honor my family and the community, and you know whatever happened with the film after at that point, I was okay with. Whether it got into one festival, whether it got into 20 festival, and obviously it did extremely well, and I'm extremely proud of that. Because I think the reality of like fiction pieces, there needs to be, I don't want to say a commercial aspect to it, but it's very hard to get a point across and get a lot of information across, and when it feels like it's kind of being shoved down your throat, if that makes sense, where you're trying to tell people, hey, you should feel bad for, you should look at this and feel bad, and you have to listen because is important, but not really showing why it's important. And so, like I said, I think within 20 minutes, we got our point across, and we still made it accessible to watch. And like I said, for me, the biggest reactions I got were from people that weren't on the West Coast and going to those festivals, and just people coming up to me afterwards. That was very rewarding for me. I will say the hardest audiences were people of the Japanese American community, of like my family, of the Veterans Association. Those are the ones I was most nervous about. I was like, if anyone's gonna pick and pull this thing apart, it's gonna be them. And so like we did this whole festival tour, and I was okay. But then we ended up showing it it's called the Friends and Family of NISEI Veterans, and it's a
Uh-huh.
veterans group located in Los Angeles. And they showed it there, and it's veterans as well as family members of the veterans and people that were in the camps. And I remember this was months after we did the festival circuit. I just was so nervous that entire time, because I was like, okay, these are the people that they're going to correct me.
And did they like it, or did they tell you, "Oh yeah, that's my story," or "I wish I was." I think Michonne and I have had that experience too. It's your own closest family and friends that are your biggest critics.
Or did they say, "Why are you telling this story? Why are you putting it out there?"
No, the response was very great. There was like little things I knew people were going to like point out. Like, for example, if you watch the film, Tule Lake is actually Manzanar, just because that's closer to LA, and for filming purposes, like, so it's not technically the same spot, but like that was something we went into it knowing that was going to happen. But no, I think the response was really awesome, and a lot of people in the community came up and thanked me for making this. And actually, at that Veterans Association, at the reunion, one of the big things they talked about, they're like, thank you so much for making this. How do we keep this conversation going, because we're actually having a very difficult time right now reaching out to the next generation, reaching out to Gen Z and Gen Alpha and getting them still involved with this kind of stuff. And again, I think that goes back to not having a direct correlation, not having a father or mother or grandparent tied to it. So it's like, how do we keep these stories alive and going for the next generations when people just aren't interested in it, or they don't have a way to connect to it? And I do think it goes back to putting it in a format that is easily digestible and then being able to explore deeper if you want to. So
yeah, for sure.
I understand independent filmmakers have a tough time raising funds to do films, and historical dramas have special needs such as costumes, locations, props, and all those elements to make the whatever year you are telling the story or whatever year the story is taking place, make all that look authentic. Tell us, what were your challenges in making this film?
Yeah, I mean, period piece films are extremely difficult to begin with. And when I ended up writing the script or finishing the script, I gave it to my producers, and I basically handed it to them, and I'm like, I already know I'm going to have to lose so much of this. So just tell me where we need to start cutting things out. But it was a little bit of twofold. So I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. I started out working in grip and lighting. I'm a union grip. I worked on a lot of TV shows, dolly gripping. And so I always wanted to get back into directing. I knew that was my end goal and my passion. It really wasn't until COVID where I kind of had this reset where there wasn't any work going on. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and start writing again and figure out stories I want to tell. And so I basically saved up my money through all those years of working and put it towards making this project. But on top of that, I made a lot of connections of really good friends who are also in the industry. So this was like, hey, I'm going to call in my if I'm going to call in my favors, I'm going to call it on this project. So this was the one that I did. And I'm originally from Northern California, the Bay Area. And so we partnered with San Jose State University to also make a teaching project as well too. That's where that's my alma mater. And we kind of made it a summer program class as well too, where it's like, hey, we're going to make this project. We're also bringing in industry professionals to help teach the students and get them up to speed on what it takes to make it in the industry while we're doing all this really cool stuff. And so that was very fun for me, basically kind of bringing the project back home as well too. And my family grew up in Fremont, California. So it felt very right to be able to film up in that area. And a lot of it is, I don't want to say luck, but I want to say it was very fortuitous circumstances of just putting it out there and good people wanting to support the project. And so the costume designer we met, she had a connection with a Japanese American guy up there who actually collected World War II uniforms. His name's Francis Hamada. He reached out, we talked, his father was in the unit. And so he had a bunch of uniforms that were not only historically accurate, they were surplus from the war. So those were the actual uniforms. Things such as the bus, for example. I was like, okay, we're going to have to write the bus out right away. And we just happened to find someone who worked for a bus museum in Fremont who they're like, oh, we have this Greyhound we just fixed up that was period correct. And we're like, okay, cool. And they rented it to us. They even had a bus driver come out and help us out. And then the Japanese American Museum of San Jose, so they actually have in the back of the museum a replica of what the inside of an internment camp, inside of a barrack looks like. And so when you watch the film, that is the actual museum at San Jose, which I highly advise anyone in the area, go check it out, go support it. There's so much amazing information in there, but we worked with them and like they rented us the space and let us film the interior there. And then for the war stuff, which again is war stuff in general, whether it's period or not, is kind of crazy. We were fortunate enough to make friends with a World War II collector up in Petaluma, up by Napa. And he had a lot of his backyard. When you watch the film, that's basically his backyard.
Oh my goodness.
And so he has a lot of pieces just laying around, and it was just, and he's a very big proponent of, keeping these stories alive and telling historical films as much as possible. And so it was just one of those things where I kept asking and he kept saying yes, where I was like, hey, can we drive a tank? Yeah. Hey, can I dig a bunch of foxholes? Yeah. Hey, can I blow up this building? He goes, yeah, sure. It's a period correct building. And so it was just one of those things where it's just people saw the merit in the project, I like to believe, and wanted to support it. And it just all kind of came together that way. So,
It's so wonderful that there's just all kinds of people
mhm,
with all kinds of interests and hobbies. I mean, that's just amazing because I was just thinking about the battle scene, and
mhm.
those aren't easy to pull together on a shoestring budget, so to speak.
Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I mean, and I can go on and on about, the stunt coordinator Alfred Singh, the effects teams and all those guys. Like, uh, the script I had a friend who had a friend who passed the script to those people, and then they would read it, and then they would call me, and it's like, hey, I'm a veteran. I appreciate what you're doing. Let me get some gear to donate to you, or let me get some help for you. And then so it was just word of mouth, just kind of building this big community and family. And the big thing for us too, because there is, it is a war scene. There is, pyrotechnics going off. There is blanks being fired. Me coming up from the crew world is I understand how important it is to feel safe on set as well. And so I didn't want to do a big spectacle and just to do a big spectacle because I've been on the receiving end of that. I will admit I've been
Mm.
on the crew side of it where people were treated very poorly, or you'd be like, "Is this really a safe situation? This doesn't seem right." And so myself and the other producer, Jessica Olthoff, we both come from the crew side. And so the idea was like, if people don't feel safe, if people don't have fun on this project as well, why are we even doing this? Like, yeah, you want to make a great film, but you don't want to, I don't want to say, you don't want to burn bridges and you don't want people to leave with a bad taste. And so by the time the film finished, it was really cool. It really felt like a family and everyone was extremely supportive of it. And and I think it just, it shows in the quality of the work too, because people want to give, their best efforts as well. So,
Yeah. Well, Darren, when we talk to folks about their films that they've made or books they've written that were made into films, etc., often there are other stories we're like, wow, that would make a great story too. So even though you talked about, it's not easy making these period films and you had to draw from a lot of different resources, are there any other historical films you'd like to see being made, or people that you'd like to see a historical film made about?
yeah, I think, and not necessarily from like a war sense, but I think the Japanese immigration story to America is very fascinating, to me anyway. I mean, obviously I'm biased because that was my great grandfather and stuff like that. But looking at something like the 1910s and the 1920s and how much Hawaiian culture is kind of infused with Japanese American culture, because that's where a lot of Japanese immigrants ended up. Like they landed in Hawaii first, worked in the sugar canes and the pineapple fields, and then migrated to California, where like my family later became strawberry farmers. And so I think there's so many layers to that as well too. And it's kind of ironic about Japanese immigration was it originally started because America was like, after the 1800s, they're like, okay, we kind of have too much Chinese immigration, and so but we still need the workforce. So what are we going to do? Oh, let's convince Japanese to come over here now too. And so it was, I don't know. It kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth where it's like, okay, you're just trying to find where the cheap workforce is, right? Another group to take advantage of. Like you're sick of them coming over here now, but you still need it. So we're going to push them out and bring someone else in. And so there's a lot of fascinating stories in that time period, within those communities that I would like to explore more. So
Yeah, well, you've certainly given us a lot of history, even just talking about your film and your family.
yeah,
This builds on our World War II portfolio for the podcast, so I'm gonna have to do a special web page.
yeah. I
Di
I think World War II is extremely important too because it is like one of the last global conflicts of that scale, right? Like now we have proxy wars and people pretending like they're not involved with things, but they really are, and all that espionage side to it. And so I think World War II is extremely important because it's the last big war that affects everyone. Um, and I look at something like my producer Jessica, whose family is Dutch. Like her grandparents were there during German occupation, and you don't hear about those stories, right? And so whenever I hear about another World War II story coming out, I don't think like, oh, this is oversaturated or anything like that. It's like this is the time period where there's so many amazing stories that need to be told, and so many constant reminders of like these tragic events that happening. So more World War II stuff that keeps coming to light, the better. So
Well, thank you, Darren, for joining us on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. And we look forward to seeing your next films.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
You can stream Darren Haruo Rae's short film NISEI on the Amaletto YouTube channel. Do a search. A link to the film is also included in the description and webpage for this podcast.
Subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever you enjoy your favorite podcast. Leave a review. Michonne and I hope you'll give the podcast 5 stars. Sign up for the e-newsletter to stay up to date on new podcasts, bonus episodes, and historical drama-related resources and activities. You can find the link on the webpage as well. Follow us on Instagram at Historical Drama Sisters and on Facebook at Historical Drama Boston Sisters. Like and share Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters on your social media.
This is Michonne Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast about historical films and series dramas. Visit our webpage at michonnebostongroup.com/Boston Sisters.
Tell us what historical dramas you're watching. Who knows? We may do a show about it. Sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with the people you know who binge on historical drama.
Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters is brought to you by the Michonne Boston Group. The views and opinions expressed on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters are those of the speakers and do not represent the positions or views of the Michonne Boston Group, its clients, or affiliates. This is Michonne Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston. Thank you for listening.